Hey everybody, welcome back to Lunch Hour VR. I'm your host today, Max Noir, as per usual, and I'm coming to you today from a very special basement in Pennsylvania. Today I'm joined with a super special guest, Oliver Dada. Thank you so much for joining me today. And yeah, how are you? Where are you? Who are you?
Wow, a lot of things. Thanks for having me, Max. Great to be here. I'm in Italy. A lot of
Nice.
people say like, why aren't you speaking with an Italian accent? That's because my mom's English, so that's why. And I'm basically a bit of a mess in the sense that I do lots of things, as you know. But for with regards to VR, the main interest is that as my main job is that of being a physiotherapist, so I'm focused on rehab, and we need to probably get into what that actually means because a lot of people have a sort of an idea about physiotherapy
Sure.
as a sports-oriented thing, and that's not the case at all in
Mm.
many cases. Although there is, a large area of physiotherapy concerned with sports there. And I'm also a developer, but I'm kind of an improvised developer. So I'm not like some semi-god like the guys that a lot of you guys have been interviewing lately. So a little bit of imposter syndrome there, definitely.
Heard that.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to point out that you're not a mess, but you're more so a Renaissance man.
Thank you. Thank you. I like that definition much better. It's all about how you frame it, isn't it?
Absolutely. No, nothing wrong with jumping into a new skill and learning it yourself, teaching yourself. That's very, very admirable. But I totally understand the imposter syndrome complex, and it sucks, but I'm looking forward to hearing more about you and what you do, which will prove to everyone who's watching that there's no need for you to have that imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Cool. So I guess if I had to kind of just go through quickly what the whole development thing, how that came about. So I was into VR just privately, like I really liked VR.
Mhm.
And I was, I'd recently started not that long ago being a physiotherapist, so like it's probably about 5 years or something like that. So
Mm.
I did that later on. So before that, I was doing other stuff like sound engineering, teaching languages and stuff. So literally, I've gone through all kinds of things.
Mm.
Um, and at one point, I was playing Beat Saber, and I was thinking this would be so cool if I could use this on on patients, but minus the strobes at easier
Yeah.
levels, excluding one arm, which you can do, but then maybe the block's a bit too far out. So then you need to write your levels. But then, you're worried that I was worried at the time that Facebook would, limit the ability to do custom songs.
Mm.
Well, Facebook, Beat Saber, but they were bought by Facebook. So, there were lots of things, and it was like I could do that, but it's going to be an awful job to do a custom song for each single patient. It's going to
Yeah.
literally take ages, and it's not really doable. So you'd have to have like templates, and then they might not like the music. Complicated.
Mm.
So that's where the idea came. I thought, well, I mean, I wonder if it's probably impossible, but I suppose I could try and um, maybe without learning to code. That's the usual thing people start with, right?
Right.
Maybe I could just try and make a sort of a really simple game. Like I had no big expectations, just bung in a song and have a few parameters. And then obviously it got out of hand, and I spent the whole pandemic just learning how to code and doing that. So that was literally at the beginning of the pandemic, roughly. So what's that? April, May? No, sorry, March,
Mm.
roughly.
Neat.
Um, and that's all I've been doing since then until recently when I started working as a physio again in the clinic. Um,
Nice.
yeah.
If we could back up a little bit at the beginning, you said that it's probably worth defining physiology. I think that that would be a
Yeah.
really good foundation to build for the people watching if we could, yeah, define that and then sort of flash forward again and connect it to what you're working on.
Yeah, so I think, like I said, I think people have an idea of physiotherapy as something And I'm not sure in the US they might call it physical therapy rather than physiotherapy. In
Hmm.
Europe, it's more physiotherapy, and there is some confusion between different, you know, things like you've got chiropractors and osteopaths and all that. So let's just start off with what physiotherapy is, and there's a lot of different, differing opinions on this kind of stuff. There's a lot of flame wars going on and lots of things between physios and osteopaths and physios and all that. But the general idea and the kind of, I think that's difficult to argue with this, is that physiotherapy is about rehabilitation.
Mm.
So it's usually about giving back independence to people. Okay. So if people have been ill or injured or something, they need to be able to move again as well as they possibly can, with to have a better lifestyle. So that the end aim is the quality of life. And it means that you might be training people to do something, to walk in a different way from before. You might not
Mm.
necessarily be pursuing objectives that are similar to somebody who hasn't had that problem. So you might be teaching them to do completely different things, because that's useful for them, right?
Yeah.
So that has to be the main aim. It shouldn't be the aim of, I don't know, just doing passive treatments the whole time. It has to be, that's at least what the kind of newer or the more evidence-based school of thought is, that it's about teaching movement and giving people back that opportunity to do things. So that's something, at least
Mm.
that's how I see it. Some people might disagree. But if you think about the word rehabilitation, it means giving people their abilities back. So,
Right.
and a lot of the patients that I treat are not anything to do with, knee injuries playing football. Most of them are neurological. So most of them are like, they could be Parkinson's or stroke,
Mm.
post-stroke patients, all that type of thing. Maybe post operation. There's lots of different types of patients, but it's not going to be something that often related to sport for a lot of physios who work in
Mm.
hospitals or clinics or anything like that. So that's just to
Interesting.
give a kind of an idea of when I say rehab and physiotherapy, what that actually means. Okay.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think also when we hear rehab in the US and maybe other places as well, we automatically go to substance. So I think that
Yeah,
that's also really helpful for us to understand here.
I did worry about that because I thought the term rehab is kind of some, even if there's lots of songs about that as well. And rehab is automatically,
Mhm.
your mind
Yeah.
goes there. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Great. So yeah, tell us a little bit about what you have been developing in relation to physical rehabilitation.
Okay, so um, okay, so let's just say basically it's a small. I'm going to kind of try and define it with a few simple words. It's a small but hopefully expandable rhythm game. And I can hear now, not another rhythm game. uh, with the objective of providing, an engaging and challenging, immersive way to increase activity levels for all types of levels. So, for somebody young who's got a lot of energy, but perhaps they're constrained to a wheelchair, for example, or it could be
Right.
somebody who's much older, but they cannot use one side of their body because they've suffered a stroke. So they literally have a paralyzed arm, and they may even have balance problems, which is obviously something we have to be very careful about with this.
Mm.
Um, and focusing on people who have the greatest need for increased mobility as well. So it might just be a tool for prehabilitation. So it might not be somebody who's had an actual problem yet, but somebody that we know is at risk, and who needs. Okay, let me paint a little picture about that. Let's imagine you have somebody, your typical grandparent, right? Somebody who's maybe in their 70s, um, who doesn't move a lot, especially during the pandemic. This was, true, but there's a lot of these people in everyday life, even pre-pandemic, right, who
Mm.
don't get enough movement. And we know that that brings a lot of bad things, right? We know that moving less means you can move less because you become rigid, you lose muscle tone, you lose range of motion. And we
Right.
also know that it's bad for your health in general because, diabetes and obesity and all this stuff, it all sort of adds on. So moving is like really important. Like I think people don't realize how important it is. It's
Mhm.
literally, I think somebody said once, if we had one drug that would practically be good for every single pathology and cost as little as possible, be completely free and be more effective than many other drugs, that would be, fitness or movement.
Right.
So literally, it's like a
Yeah.
free medicine that is good for everything. Anyway, so the idea is that, it can be used to develop a tool that can be used depending on the patient in many different ways. But I didn't really want to limit myself to saying, okay, this is for that type of patient. I wanted to be a
Mhm.
little bit generic, which is why I did a rhythm game based on reaching. So it's basically, instead of slicing, which isn't quite so useful for people as a functional skill in everyday life, reaching and touching something is super important, because it's basically 90% of what you do when you're doing stuff in everyday life, right?
Right.
So one of the principles in physiotherapy is that you should be focalized on an external objective, because you learn the movement better that way. So if I'm telling you do this, it's meaningless for you. So you're not going to learn much. If I tell
Yeah.
you grab the index cord here, which is a bad idea, then that's going to be something that you're doing for a reason.
Yeah.
And so there's a kind of an external objective. You're focused on the object, not your arm. And because of how our brain works, that seems to be more effective in learning.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I think that's more or less the idea anyway. I could go on for ages,
Cool.
so you have to stop me sometime.
I bet. Well, yeah, I'd love to play one of the videos so that people can see a little bit about, what it looks like, and then you can tell us what we just watched. But before I do that, shout out to Dean Yeats, who says happy lunch hour. He was on my show during the VRTO conference last week, and he actually played the trombone
I saw that. That was
inside of
awesome.
yeah, inside of VR. It was so cool. My mind was blown. So welcome
Yeah,
back,
that was
Dean.
really cool to watch. Hi, Dean. Congrats.
Hey, Dean. All right, so I'll play the first video and then you can tell us a little bit about what we saw.
Yeah, sure.
That's so cute. I love the pirate ship islandy vibes. Yeah,
Yeah.
really, really dig that vibe. It reminded me of one of the old Crash Bandicoot.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
That's so
games.
cool. I like that.
Well, I'm trying to remember which game it was. I want to say it was Warped, and you had the female character. I can't remember her name, but she had a wave runner, and she was driving through pirate ships, and they were doing little bombs at you.
I'm trying to remember that. I don't know. I have one image stamped in my mind, which was, I think, from a more recent. Oh no, that was Monkey Island. Sorry, that was Monkey Island. A drunk guy in a pub going Balzac, which I really love. For some reason,
That's
awesome. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, these videos were done pretty much in a hurry. I haven't managed to implement, having a camera that's further back, which doesn't shake all the way all the time.
Yeah, no worries.
But better than nothing.
Yeah. So that was the game menu. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I kind of wanted to see some of that. That was just to kind of show where the game happens. Obviously, no more strobes. Something that even somebody maybe not like. We might like being in Half-Life Alyx, but somebody who's 75 might want something a bit more reassuring, like a sunset. So. Not necessarily. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of 70-year-old heavy metalers who want to listen to like Megadeth in the background and have skulls all around. So eventually, hopefully, I can cater for them too. But this is a little bit more neutral. Who doesn't like the sea with the sunset?
Right.
So that was one reason, and the other one was obviously strobes are bad because you might somebody who's had a stroke might have some problem with photosensitivity, so flashing lights,
Yeah.
big no-go.
Yeah.
And the menu is like, I haven't done hand tracking yet, but I'm going to. Hopefully it won't cause too many problems with, reaching out. But the idea is that the menu, which I completely redid, it was like a point and click thing.
Mm.
Now you don't actually have to touch any buttons. You just literally press the buttons like this, and the sliders you put
Oh,
your hand
great.
in, and move them like that. So that's the reason for that is that many people might have problems holding controllers or have problems clicking the buttons if they have a spastic hand. You'll often see,
Right.
patients with some limitations. So that was like a lot of work to do that, but I'm quite happy with that.
Great.
So that's what we saw.
So, I mean, touching on that, because it seems like you are developing with a lot of different types of accessible needs in mind. This was also part of a talk I did at VRTO last week.
Hmm.
We touched on as a community a lot on accessibility and sort of how there are so many different types of accessibility that need to be kept in mind when developing, and it
Yeah.
can be tricky to sort of incorporate all of them. So I wanted to know if you're open to anyone reaching out to you on tips. And maybe, maybe you have some tips that you could give people in terms of how you developed in this way with the hands and things like that. Because I think it's really important that the community sort of works together to sort of create like a development assets sort of
Yeah.
toolkit of accessibility so that every dev doesn't have to start from ground zero.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that works both ways because there may be things I haven't considered, because I've considered very much the movement aspect.
Yeah.
Um, and also, it must be said that you can't get everyone, right? Not everyone is going to be able to play this because simply there are some limitations where, this isn't, things have like a filter. So you can't always
Yeah.
include everyone. There's some patients won't be able to play this because they may be too much at risk of
Hmm.
falling over. For example, Parkinson's patients, I think one of the leading causes of death is, falling because they have a problem actuating what a kind of automatic postural adaptation. So that means
Yeah.
if I'm about to fall, I'll put my hand out to stop myself. They can't do that.
Yeah.
They'll freeze up, or they'll have. So this is something that probably won't be able to be used for them, for example. And there may be other people who won't be able to make use of it.
Sure.
But as much as I can, if other people want to say, hey, look, you didn't consider such and such, then if I can, definitely. Somebody asked me about amputees, like arm
Mm.
amputees, and that should be fine. But there was something else that somebody asked me about, and I wasn't sure how to do that.
Mm.
Um,
It's interesting though, because I think that most VR developers, they sort of build the app and then they work backwards in terms of accessibility while
yeah,
you're sort of, starting out with that in mind and building forwards. So I think that that's really, really cool. And yeah, I'm sure that you have a lot of amazing tips or advice for anyone who wants to reach out to you,
yeah, absolutely,
if you're
and
open to that.
absolutely. It's something that I feel quite strongly about as well because I kind of deal all day with people who struggle to do things that we take completely for granted. So,
Yeah.
and it also gives you a different perspective on things like, I don't want to kind of drone on, but I hear a lot of complaining and whining on, people in general on Twitter anyway. Not just on Twitter, like, in ordinary life. And when, your day-to-day life is seeing people struggling to tie their shoes up because
Hmm.
that's really, really hard for them. Like if they can do that, they're like over the moon. Or people who are progressively losing their movement and they know that it's just going to get worse, then everything else is you can live with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Perfectly willing to help anyone who needs any help if I can.
Wonderful. And are your Twitter DMs open?
What's that mean? Is it? Oh yeah, sure. I read them. Yeah, I'm not very
Perfect.
popular, so I read them all.
Perfect. Well, Oliver's Twitter handle is up here on the screen if anyone wants to reach out for, that topic or really any other topic. Um, I want to play the second video now, or
Mhm.
else we can go on with this topic forever. 'Cause it's also really important to me as someone with epilepsy and who was in bed for almost 10 years. So
Wow, didn't know that.
yeah, surprise. Yeah, I had chronic Lyme disease, so I was sleeping 16 plus hours a day for almost 10 years. And with that, sort of my physical health just continued to decline that entire decade. So now I'm sort of on the steady uphill climb, but it's definitely difficult to get your body, moving and going
Yeah.
again,
So you know
adjusting
where
to
this is coming from kind of thing, and well done,
yeah,
for
yeah.
congratulations for getting under it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, so I'll play the second video and then you can tell us about it.
Okay.
All right, what was that?
What on earth is going on there? So basically, that's a rather probably I could have done that in a simpler way. Eventually, I'm gonna sort of make it easier. But I basically wanted people to have complete control over checking whether they can reach something, because the thing
Right.
is, this might end up as an app that is given to a therapist, in which case I want to
Mm,
implement tablet control. So from the outside, the therapist can choose things. But it might also end up as something which somebody might want to have for them, like a patient might want to have for themselves and be able to set everything themselves, right?
mm,
So what that does is that with the menu, you can kind of say, like, imagine you've already done the calibration. So the calibration already takes care of excluding things you can't reach. But you might then want to say, I've got a kind of a bad back and I don't want to bend down much, so I'd like to eliminate just the last one. Or you might decide that you want your patient to focus on the external targets and not the middle bit, so you can
mm,
exclude that. So when you see the menu going black, that means it's less. There's like a percentage of how often those appear.
mm.
When you, and obviously it's a bit messy because if some things influence other things, but you can get more or less whatever you want out of that menu, so you can it's
Right.
pretty flexible. And you
That's
can control
amazing.
stuff like crossover. So if a sphere is coming from this side, then you can avoid so say that a sphere is coming from this side and I need to get it with this hand, then you might not want them to immediately have to do this, because that's going to put them off balance. So it might be something that you want to do to avoid that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to work on that a lot more and see if I can add or take away things that aren't useful. But that's basically what that is. And that little guy there with the genie, I call him, with the thing on his head, he's kind of doing what you're doing. It's basically mirroring your movements. So you can see on the grid, which represents the spheres where they spawn, you can see whether you would be able to reach that or not. So how
Mm,
difficult. So you might go, okay, I can get up to here. I want everything else to be black, and the ones that where the spheres might spawn should be green.
mm,
I started planning that when I was still pretty it was like at the beginning I was learning to code, so probably if I could go back I would have done it all in a different way, but
mm.
it's all right. Eventually I'll do a better version or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's really, really amazing, just seeing how customizable it is for so many different people. So big kudos on that.
Thanks.
And I'm just gonna jump right in and play the last video because this is flying
Yeah,
by.
sure. Okay.
I loved that because the music, at first I was like, "Oh no," because the music went into a very, like, sad, you failed, like, space, but then it, like, kept going in a way that was, like, kind of fun to jam to and
I know,
sort
I
of
do that. I often rather like that myself. I like listening to records. When I used to have a record player, I used to actually put them on purposefully at the wrong speed because I would kind of enjoy listening to them slow.
That's
Um,
awesome. It sort of felt like a slow clap, like, "Let's
yeah.
go, get back up."
Anyway, that's more or less it. I did want to mention that I've partnered with XRSI for
Nice.
using this game. We have, at least for now, one project which hasn't yet, I'm probably not going to talk about it now because it hasn't yet actually started, but it's
Sure.
in a good stage. So yeah, XRSI, for anyone who doesn't know about them, it's XR Safety Initiative. They take care of lots of. I could talk for a long time to explain, but
Mm,
basically, they are working on in the area of ethics, privacy frameworks or privacy frameworks, depending on how you want to pronounce that, child safety, and I guess in this case on things regarding rehab. And I'm
mm,
part of one of the subdivisions, which is Ready Hacker One, and they take care of
mm.
news, right? So XR, not just as a series of gadgets, but something aimed more at figuring out the kind of serious problems and opportunities that can come along with XR. So
Sure.
that's who they are, just in case. I thought it
Yeah,
was,
yeah,
you know,
they're a great organization, and I
mm,
encourage anyone in the audience to check them out. Um, we only have a couple minutes left. This always goes
that's fine.
by so fast, so I would love to hear about your roadmap for this program and, yeah, like, what are you hoping to build or improve, or where you wanna go with this?
So I'm not somebody who plans things because every time I've planned something, the plan doesn't always go as planned. And
Yep.
so I always find that if you're flexible and plan for everything, like you say, okay, if that happens, I can do this. If that happens, I can do that.
Yeah.
And I just let things flow. And I've always been a bit like that, which makes me a bit messy. In fact, my code is
Yeah.
horrible. I hope nobody ever sees it, but it works, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't quite know, to be honest, but I think really the idea is to try and do something as useful as possible with this. So if I can
Mhm.
do a few projects with it, maybe find some opportunities where this can be sustainable, so where I can do this as a part-time um, job, let's say.
Yeah.
But really, even if that doesn't happen, I'm probably still going to be working on it anyway, part-time, as long as I can, just because I would like it. I believe it is useful. It's not a replacement for physiotherapy, and that's something that really makes me angry when people think that um,
Sure.
technology can replace people with this type of thing, where there's
Right.
however, it's exceedingly useful, especially for patients when they're not actually having therapy. They need to do something independently from their therapist, because that's the aim, right? We don't want to keep them there forever. They need to be walk with their own feet, so to speak, right?
Right.
So the plan is basically just to see wherever I can implement this, and then I'm going to be adding on more sub games, more exercises, more things when I can. It's a long job, so I want to get
Yeah.
this done well, and then if I can get some funding, maybe it'll be something I can expand in some way, or maybe just make a new app for something else. I don't know.
Very
Pretty
cool.
open.
Yeah. So, is your app readily available currently or not yet? If
No, it's not. I'm not even sure it's going to be on sale. It might be something that I only use in projects, or I'm not really sure about that yet. I'm not going to sort of. I might. I really don't know. Depends on how things go. Obviously, the ideal thing for me, if I could, would be for it to be if it was sustainable with, you know, funding and stuff like that, then I would love it for it to be free for everyone. But I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that, so we'll see.
Sure.
But again, you know, I haven't really planned that type of stuff yet. I'm not, not really sure.
Not a planner.
No, exactly.
Well, where's the best place that people can sort of get updates from you and your work? Is it social? Is it your website?
I think really, I mean, I always answer anyone if anyone's interested. I'm like, I don't. You can find me on Twitter, and I'll just answer any mail or any DM rather. But the updates eventually will be probably mainly on Twitter, to be honest, because in the end, it's just a platform I use the most, and the website is always a bit of a clunky way to give people updates.
Sure.
I find that it's kind of better to do it that way.
Sure.
So yeah, probably on Twitter. I always post updates of what's going on.
Very cool. So everyone make sure to give him a follow. His handle is right here. And the last question that I have for you is, how can we as a community support you and your work?
Well, I mean, me personally, you can give me loads of money and I'll do the act. But I think if you mean kind of this type of thing, like me or anyone else doing stuff like that, then I would say, I mean, I see a lot of people, and I'm going to mention, for example, Eric, right? Eric's chosen to go to do something, you know, similar to what you do, right? To go, you know, go and look for those things that are not part of the mainstream, but they're more about, you know, the opportunities, health, and all these things. And I appreciate that. And I think there's a lot of people who could do a little bit of that. They wouldn't need to convert completely to that, but they could spare maybe a few views every now and then to do the odd video, just talking about things that people are trying to do, because there are people really putting a lot of free time into stuff to help people, right? And there are people who are completely, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's not like you have to, but you know, if especially content creators could perhaps just create a little bit of awareness. I think, you know, if you're a content creator, you have a responsibility because you are the media now. And you teach people how to think. You know, you might not want to, but you do. So people need to be shown things that they might not know about. People don't know what people are going through, right, in some parts of the world or stuff like that. So people who are, in fact, you know, to affect the news should try, or at least part of the news should try to do good, right? So I appreciate anyone like yourself, Eric, and you know, we know who you are, right? The 2 or 3 who are doing that type of thing. I appreciate that very much, because it's something aimed at, you know, with a sense of good about it, and I think that's generally just very important to me. So
beautiful. Well, I really appreciate that, and I know that this has been part of the discourse on, you know, VR and AR Twitter recently. It's, you know, people are talking about it, so it's not the first time you guys are hearing this, content creators. Be brave, you know, use your platforms to do more than you're doing. But you know, with that, we're out of time. We actually went over because I was having fun.
It was nice. That was a fun chat.
I'm so glad. Well, thank you so very much for being here, and for the audience, I want to thank you guys as well for being here week after week. And quick second of self promotion, I would encourage you to consider subscribing to my Patreon, because I don't get paid to do this, and it would be really cool if someday I could. So just keep that in your back or front pocket. But yeah, Oliver, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
For me too. Thanks.
All right. Cheers, everyone. See you back here same time next week. Bye.